It was a typical Tuesday evening when the world as I knew it crumbled. I had just returned from work, the weight of the day still clinging to my shoulders. The house was quiet, unusually so. My wife, Claire, was supposed to be home, but as I dropped my briefcase by the door and called out her name, the silence echoed back at me. My heart raced a little. She'd mentioned something about picking up groceries, but that was odd. I glanced at the clock. She should have been back by now. I headed to the kitchen, expecting to find a note or maybe an unfinished dinner. Instead, I found a half-open laptop on the kitchen table. It was Claire's, and the screen flickered to life as I approached. I don't know what compelled me to look at it, but something gnawed at me, a feeling I couldn't shake. As I moved closer, I saw the email window open and my breath caught in my throat. The subject line read, "Can't wait for tonight." My heart dropped. I leaned in closer, my pulse quickening. The message was from Ethan, our child's tutor. I had never thought much of Ethan. He was young, ambitious, and had a way with our son, but I had no reason to suspect anything. As I read the exchange, a sickening realization began to dawn on me. "Your husband is oblivious." One line read, "I love the way you look at me when you think no one is watching." My hands shook as I clutched the edge of the table. Betrayal sliced through me like a knife, and I felt the walls of my world closing in. How could she do this? How could she betray me with someone so close to our family? I stumbled back, reeling from the shock. Memories flooded my mind. Our wedding day, the laughter we shared, the dreams we built together. All those moments now felt tainted, distorted by this new reality. I felt like a fool, a complete and utter fool. The image of her smiling at Ethan, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in years, burned into my mind. I closed the laptop, my heart racing as I tried to process the whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, all of it crashed over me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, to confront her. Right then and there, but part of me held back. I needed to be smart about this. I needed to understand the full extent of her betrayal before I acted. As the evening dragged on, I sat in silence, my mind racing with questions. What had driven her to this? Was it something I had done? Was I not enough? I felt like a stranger in my own home, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I glanced at our child's drawings on the fridge, innocent and untouched by the chaos brewing beneath the surface. How could I protect him from this? The clock ticked loudly in the background, each second stretching into eternity. I could hear the faint sound of tires on gravel, the car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I prepared myself for her return, knowing that everything was about to change. Would I confront her immediately? Or would I bide my time, gather more evidence, and make my move when she least expected it? A dark resolve began to form within me. I would not let this betrayal go unpunished. I would expose her, and in doing so, I would reclaim my dignity. As she walked through the door, her face lit up with that familiar smile. I steeled myself. She had no idea what I knew. No idea that her perfect little world was about to come crashing down. Before the discovery of Claire's betrayal, our life together was a tapestry woven with shared dreams, laughter, and the occasional frayed thread. We had been together for over a decade, and while we weren't without our struggles, I had always believed that our love was strong enough to endure anything. In many ways, we were a typical couple. We had met in college, both driven and ambitious, and our relationship had blossomed from late-night study sessions to cozy weekends filled with adventures. Claire was vibrant, a free spirit who lit up the room with her laughter. She had a way of making even the dullest moments feel alive. We shared a passion for travel, and our trips to distant places were filled with exploration and discovery. We often talked about our future, about raising a family, and we were thrilled when our son, Max, was born. Parenthood brought us closer, or so I thought. In the early years, we were a team, tackling sleepless nights and diaper changes with humor and grace. However, as Max grew, the dynamics began to shift. Claire, once a career-driven woman, decided to take a step back from her job to focus on being a full-time mom. I admired her dedication, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The lightness in her laughter began to fade, replaced by a heaviness that I couldn't quite understand. I found myself consumed by work, often staying late to provide for our family, and I thought that my sacrifices would be appreciated. But as the days turned into months, I noticed a growing distance between us. Our conversations became superficial, revolving around schedules and chores rather than dreams and aspirations. I tried to bridge the gap, organizing date nights and weekend outings, but it felt like I was trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. Then came Ethan, the tutor we hired to help Max with his schoolwork. He was charming, knowledgeable, and had a natural rapport with our son. I remember the first time I saw him interact with Max. They were laughing over math problems, and I felt a sense of relief. Claire seemed to enjoy his company too, and I encouraged their interactions, thinking it was good for both of them. Little did I know, I was paving the way for my own heartbreak. As I reflect on our relationship, I realized that Claire had been searching for something, perhaps a connection or validation that she felt was missing. I had been so focused on my career that I failed to notice her struggles. I thought she was content, but in retrospect, her smiles often masked a deeper dissatisfaction. When I discovered her affair, it was as if a fog had lifted, revealing the cracks in our marriage that I had been too blind to see. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow, not just towards her but towards myself for not recognizing the signs earlier. The thought that she had turned to Ethan, someone so closely intertwined in our lives, made the betrayal sting all the more. In that moment of realization, I felt a fire ignite within me. I couldn't just stand idly by while my world crumbled. I needed to confront this reality, not just for myself but for Max. I couldn't let him grow up in a home filled with deceit. I began to think about the steps I would take. I would need to gather evidence to confirm what I had read and seen. I would need to be strategic. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring that Claire understood the gravity of her actions. I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. Our relationship, once a source of joy, had become a battleground. I would need to prepare myself for the fight ahead, to navigate the emotional minefield that lay before me. I had to think carefully about my next steps. As I sat there, the weight of the revelation pressing down on my chest, I knew that this was just the beginning. I was no longer the oblivious husband. I was a man on a mission to expose the truth. The days following my discovery were a blur, a chaotic mix of emotions that left me feeling unmoored. I had always prided myself on being a rational man, but now my thoughts swirled like a tempest. I was no longer just a husband. I was a detective, driven by a singular purpose: to unveil the truth behind Claire's betrayal. The first thing I needed was proof. The email exchange I had stumbled upon was damning, but I needed more than words on a screen. I began to pay closer attention to Claire's behavior, looking for any signs that would confirm my worst fears. I watched her as she moved through our daily routines, searching for any telltale signs of guilt. I noticed the little things: the way her phone buzzed with messages that she quickly dismissed, the late nights she claimed were spent grading papers for her book club, the lingering scent of cologne that was not mine. Each observation added another layer to the growing dread in my stomach. I felt like I was watching a play unfold, one where I was both the audience and the unwilling participant. One evening, I decided to take a more proactive approach. I had a few days off coming up and I planned to use that time to gather evidence. I made sure to get my hands on Claire's phone while she was taking a shower. It felt wrong, invasive, but I was desperate for the truth. I scrolled through her messages, my heart racing with every notification I opened. Most were mundane group chats about school events, but then I found the thread with Ethan. The messages were flirtatious, charged with an intimacy that made my skin crawl. Claire had shared personal thoughts, her frustrations with me, and how Ethan was always there for her. It felt like a dagger twisting deeper with every word I read. My heart ached with betrayal, but that pain was soon replaced with a sense of resolve. I would not allow this to go unanswered. Over the next few days, I became methodical. I began to track the times Claire would meet with Ethan, looking for patterns. I discovered that their tutoring sessions often extended well beyond the scheduled hour, and I noted the days when she seemed particularly happy or distracted. I even reached out to a couple of parents from the school, casually asking about Ethan's reputation. Most spoke highly of him, but there were whispers, rumors of him being too close to some of the mothers during tutoring sessions. I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't the only one who had noticed. I also decided to enlist the help of a friend. Tom, a former private investigator turned bartender, was someone I trusted. I confided in him, sharing my suspicions and the evidence I had gathered. He listened intently, nodding as I laid out my plan. "You need to be careful," he warned. "This sort of thing can blow up in your face. Make sure you're prepared for the fallout." His words echoed in my mind, but I was too far gone to turn back. As the days passed, I felt a combination of dread and anticipation. I was living a double life, acting as if everything was normal while I plotted my revenge. I would play the dutiful husband, all the while gathering the pieces of this puzzle. Each day brought me closer to the confrontation I had envisioned, the moment when I would expose Claire for who she truly was. I decided to set a trap. I needed to catch her in a moment of weakness, perhaps even with Ethan. I arranged for Max to spend the weekend at my sister's house, creating the perfect opportunity for Claire and Ethan to meet without interruption. I made sure to leave the house early that Saturday morning, feigning a trip to the office. I could feel my heart pounding as I drove around the block, watching our home from a distance. The plan was simple: wait for them to arrive, then confront them both. I had no idea how I would feel in that moment, whether I would be filled with rage or sorrow, but I knew that I needed to see it for myself. I needed to witness the truth unfold before my eyes. As I sat in my car, watching the sun rise over the horizon, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. The anticipation was electric, but so was the fear of what I would discover. I couldn't allow myself to think about the consequences, not yet. I was too far down this path to turn back. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The morning air was crisp as I sat in my car, parked a safe distance away from our home. I had arrived early to ensure I wouldn't miss a moment. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. I had meticulously planned this day, and now it was time to put everything into action. As I waited, I reviewed the details of my plan in my mind. I had decided to use the element of surprise to my advantage. Claire had no idea that I was onto her, and I intended to keep it that way until the moment was right. I had even created a plausible excuse for my absence, telling her I had a last-minute project at work. The truth was, I was prepared to expose her infidelity and shatter the facade she had built around our lives. I had one goal: to catch Claire and Ethan together, to confront them in a moment of undeniable truth. I imagined the moment when I would walk into the house, their laughter echoing off the walls, their intimacy laid bare before me. I wanted Claire to see the pain in my eyes, to understand the depth of her betrayal. It was a twisted sense of justice, but I felt it was the only way to reclaim my dignity. As I sat there, I recalled the evidence I had gathered: the emails, the messages, the whispers from other parents. Each piece of proof was like a stone in my arsenal, ready to be thrown at her when the time came. I had even thought about the words I would say, how I would frame the confrontation. I wanted to make it clear that this wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about the trust that had been shattered between us. After what felt like an eternity, I saw Claire's car pull into the driveway. My heart jumped into my throat. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. I watched as she stepped out, her demeanor light and carefree, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the door. I felt a pang of sadness wash over me. The woman I had loved and built a life with was standing there, but the reality of her actions loomed larger than ever. I waited a few moments, allowing her to settle in, to let the normalcy of the day envelop her. I needed to be patient. I knew that Ethan would arrive soon. Their tutoring sessions had become a ritual, and I was determined to capture the moment that would expose the truth. As the minutes passed, I felt the tension in my chest grow. I checked my watch. It was nearly 11. I couldn't afford to lose my nerve now. I turned on my phone's recording feature, ensuring that I would have evidence of the confrontation. I wanted every word documented, every expression captured in case I needed to reflect on this moment later. Then, just as I had anticipated, I saw Ethan's car pull up. My heart raced as I watched him step out, his casual demeanor contrasting sharply with the storm brewing inside me. He approached the house with a confidence that made my blood boil. I felt the anger rise within me, but I kept it in check. This was my moment, and I needed to stay focused. I waited until he had entered the house, the door closing behind him. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. I opened the car door quietly and stepped out, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked up to the front door, my steps measured and deliberate. I could hear their laughter drifting through the walls, a sound that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scene that greeted me was everything I had feared and more. Claire and Ethan were sitting on the couch, their bodies angled toward each other, laughter spilling from their lips. Time seemed to freeze as I stood there, the reality of the moment crashing down around me. They turned to look at me, shock and guilt washing over Claire's face. Ethan's expression shifted from surprise to panic as he realized the gravity of the situation. I could see the color drain from Claire's face, her smile faltering as she registered my presence. "Surprise," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "Looks like I found you both enjoying a little private tutoring session." Claire's eyes widened and I saw the realization dawn on her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I had them both cornered and I intended to make my point crystal clear. "Do you care to explain this?" I asked, gesturing between them. "Because I have a feeling this isn't just about Max's math homework." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Claire's mind racing, trying to formulate a response while Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her. I had taken control of the narrative, and now it was time for the truth to come out. The air in the room was thick with tension, a palpable silence that felt almost suffocating. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, staring at Claire and Ethan as they processed the reality of my unexpected arrival. Claire's eyes were wide, a mixture of shock and fear, while Ethan's expression shifted from surprise to immediate regret. The laughter that had once filled the room was replaced by a heavy stillness, and I could almost hear the clock ticking in the background, counting down the moments until everything changed. Claire began, her voice faltering as she struggled to find the right words. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, but I was in no mood for her excuses. I raised my hand to silence her, my voice steady but laced with barely contained rage. "Save it," I said, cutting her off. "I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" Claire opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. I could see her grappling with the reality of the situation, and I felt a surge of satisfaction at having caught her off guard. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her, his gaze darting between us, clearly unsure of how to navigate this confrontation. "Michael, please," Claire said, finally finding her voice. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I shot back, my anger bubbling to the surface. "What exactly does it look like, Claire? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been having an affair with our son's tutor." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. I watched as realization washed over her, the weight of my accusation sinking in. I could see the color drain from her face, her expression shifting from shock to guilt. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she stammered, her voice shaking. "It was just supposed to be about Max's tutoring. We connected and You connected," I interrupted, incredulous. "So that's what you call it. You knew exactly what you were doing, Claire. You let it go too far. How could you betray me like this? How could you betray our family?" Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy, but the anger coursing through me drowned out any compassion I might have felt. I had loved this woman, trusted her with my life, and she had shattered that trust in the most intimate way possible. Ethan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Michael, I didn't mean for it to happen either. I thought it was just harmless flirting. I swear it didn't start out like this." I turned my gaze to him, my fury boiling over. "Harmless flirting? You're a tutor. You're supposed to be helping our son, not seducing his mother." Claire's tears began to flow freely now, and I could see the guilt etched on her face, but I wasn't interested in her tears or her remorse. I wanted her to understand the gravity of her actions, to feel the weight of the betrayal she had inflicted on our family. I want to know everything, I demanded, my voice firm. How long has this been going on? What have you told him? What did you think would happen? Claire looked away, unable to meet my gaze. It started a few months ago, I did. Mean for it to go this far, I just felt lonely. You've been so busy with work and I thought I was doing the right thing by focusing on Max. I didn't realize how much I missed connection. The justification stung. So you thought cheating on me was the solution. You thought betraying our vows was the answer. I'm sorry, Michael, she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. Zing yourself? I scoffed. What about us? What about our family? You didn't think about that at all. The confrontation felt endless, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over us like waves. I could see the regret in Claire's eyes, but I also saw something else, an acknowledgement that she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I thought I could control it, she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. But then it just happened. I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want to hurt Max. I didn't know how to stop. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. You should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with him. You should have thought about your family before you let it get this far. As the weight of her betrayal hung heavily in the air, I turned my attention to Ethan. And you're just as guilty in this. You knew she was married. You knew she had a family. How could you think this was okay? I never meant to hurt anyone, he replied, his voice shaky. It was a mistake and I regret it, I thought. I thought it was just harmless fun at first. Harmless fun, I echoed, incredulous. You're both living in a fantasy world if you think this is harmless. This is real life and you've both made choices that will have consequences. The reality of the situation crashed over me like a tidal wave. I had caught them, but the pain of the betrayal was still fresh, raw and unyielding. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring down into the abyss. This moment was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. As I stared at Claire, tears streaming down her face, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The love I once had for her was now intertwined with feelings of betrayal and anger. I felt like a part of me had been ripped away, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that had been shattered. Get out, I said, my voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of pain. Both of you, I need time to think. Claire's eyes widened in shock, and I could see the realization of what I had just said sink in. Michael, please don't. Now, I shouted, the anger spilling over. I can't even look at you right now. Just leave. As they both scrambled to gather their things, I felt a mix of relief and heartache. I had taken a stand, but at what cost? I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, and I knew that the aftermath of this confrontation would change everything. The door slammed shut behind Claire and Ethan, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. I stood in the middle of our living room, the remnants of my shattered world swirling around me like debris in a storm. The laughter that had once filled this space now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the heavy weight of betrayal and heartache. I had confronted them, exposed the truth, but the reality of what had just happened was settling in like a lead blanket. I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling as I ran them through my hair. The adrenaline that had fueled my confrontation began to fade, leaving me exhausted and hollow. I felt as if I had just emerged from a battlefield, the emotional wounds too raw to comprehend. How had we come to this? How had the woman I loved chosen to betray me in such a profound way? I thought of Max, our innocent son, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had erupted in our lives. The thought of him brought a fresh wave of pain. He deserved better than this. I had always believed we were building a solid foundation for him, a safe home filled with love and trust. Now I couldn't help but wonder how I would explain this to him when the time came. As I sat there, memories flooded my mind. Our wedding day, the laughter we shared, the dreams we built together. I had loved Claire fiercely with every fiber of my being. But now that love felt tainted, overshadowed by the betrayal that had unfolded before my eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling of loss, not just for the relationship we had, but for the future I had envisioned for us as a family. I grabbed my phone, staring at it for a long moment. I had documented the confrontation, and part of me felt compelled to listen to it. I needed to hear the truth spoken aloud to remind myself that this wasn't just a nightmare I would wake up from. I pressed play, and the sound of my voice echoed in the room, raw and filled with emotion. Hearing the pain in my own words brought tears to my eyes. As I listened, I realized that while the confrontation had been difficult, it was necessary. I had taken a stand not just for myself, but for Max. I would not allow this betrayal to define our family. I needed to be the rock that he could rely on, the one who would protect him from the fallout of our shattered lives. Days turned into weeks as I navigated the aftermath of that fateful confrontation. Claire moved out, staying with friends while we figured out what to do next. The silence in the house was deafening, and I found myself lost in a haze of emotions. I tried to keep things normal for Max, but it was a delicate balancing act. I didn't want him to feel the weight of our troubles, yet I knew that he would sense the change in the air. I began to seek counseling for myself, trying to make sense of the betrayal and the pain that accompanied it. I wanted to understand why Claire had chosen this path, and more importantly, I wanted to heal. The sessions were challenging, forcing me to confront feelings I had buried deep within. I spoke about my anger, my sadness, and the sense of betrayal that gnawed at my heart. Through it all, I began to learn about myself. I realized that while Claire had made a choice to betray our family, I had the power to choose how I would respond. I refused to let her actions define my worth. I was a good man, a loving father, and I would not be diminished by her mistakes. As time passed, I found myself slowly rebuilding my life. I focused on Max, ensuring he felt loved and supported. I encouraged him to express his feelings, to talk about what was happening, and I did my best to reassure him that it was not his fault. I wanted him to know that love could endure, even in the face of betrayal. Claire and I eventually settled into a new routine, navigating co-parenting with the understanding that our relationship would never be the same. There were moments of tension, of unresolved anger, but I held firm to my resolve. I was determined to create a peaceful environment for Max, and in doing so, I found a sense of purpose. One evening, as I tucked Max into bed, he looked up at me with wide eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to be okay?" I paused, searching for the right words. "We're going to be okay, buddy. It might take some time, but we'll always be a family, even if things look a little different now." He nodded, a small smile breaking through his uncertainty. In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was learning to navigate this new reality, to embrace the challenges ahead. As I closed the door to his room, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past begin to lift. I had faced the storm, and while the scars of betrayal would remain, I was determined to forge a new path. I was ready to reclaim my life, to embrace the future with resilience and strength. Trust may have been shattered, but I would not let it define my story. I would rise from the ashes, stronger than before, ready to face whatever came next. And so, I took the first step toward healing, ready to embrace the journey ahead.